Hey, good morning. Welcome. Way to come to church on Thanksgiving weekend. I mean, if there was ever a weekend that you could just skip, especially if you're tuning in at home, you don't even get the social points for that. People can't even see it. It's like you're in your own little prayer closet doing it for the right reasons. Good for you. So good to have everybody. Hey, I want to thank Sarah for being here and helping us out today. And I want to thank everybody for adjusting and learning to pay attention, if you are a hearing person, to me. Because I know that some of you are like, oh, this is now when I can learn sign language. And some of you we've talked with, it's like, oh, I've just got to get used to it. There's two of you up there. And so I want to thank everybody for your patience. Change is difficult and hard, but it's really a good thing. Our vision and goal is so that every non-hearing person can experience our service and they can sit wherever they want to in the auditorium, just like our hearing community can. And you know what? That's happening. And so that's exciting. So give yourselves a big hand. And if Sarah starts to steal the show here, just let me know. And we'll take care of that. No, so it's good to have everybody. If you're a part of the non-hearing community, thank you so much for being here today. We love having everybody with us. One of our values is inclusion, and we're just growing and learning. We don't do it perfect, but we're trying our best. Can I just say this? This isn't part of the message. The game doesn't start till 2:30, so why not? Okay. I do love our church. I really do. I love our church pressing in and trying to live into our values. I love you all. Being able to pray with people, what a privilege. And so thank you very much for just being in an awesome space. And that doesn't mean we don't have our challenges. We do. Most of them are sitting right here in the room right now. But other than that, we're doing all right. So, hey, we're in our series called Feast of Gratitude. We're wrapping it up. My name is Ryan. I'm the lead pastor here at Crossroads Church. It's great to be with you. If you are a guest today, or if you've been around for a while, COVID has hit. And if I haven't got time to spend time with you, having coffee or hanging out, happy hour, whatever it might be, I'd love to do that. My cell phone number's on the website. If you're tuning in online, if you're here in the room, it's 207-608-1106. Send me a text message. I would absolutely love to hang out and get to know you and hear your story. So many of you I've been able to do that with. I really do mean it. It's one of the best parts of my week when I get to do that. It's a high priority for me. So I would love to do that. And I'm perfectly happy to let you pay. It's my spiritual gift to you. No, I'm just kidding. It's on me. So just let me know, all right? Hey, listen, our anchor verse for this series is found in 1 Thessalonians 5:18. 1 Thessalonians is a letter in the New Testament, the second part of the Christian Bible. And it says, in all circumstances, give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus. And so we're exploring the wisdom of this one little verse over these past 3 weeks. And we've been talking about finding gratitude in our past, finding gratitude in our present, and today I want to talk about finding gratitude in our future. And I've said this a couple of times, and I always want to hone into it, that the past and the future have a tendency of really messing with the present, because the present is true. The present is true. It is the most true experience you have right now. If you're tuning in online, if you're out in the atrium, if you're in the room, if you're listening to this on demand, this present moment is the most truthful thing in your life. It is what is. Very philosophical for you. So, and oftentimes our past and our future get in the way of what we want to and what God wants us to experience in this moment. Let me ask you a question. Raise your hand up nice and high if you love surprises. Raise your hand up nice and high if you love surprises. For those of you that love surprises, you'll be surprised to know we're going to be here a long time today. So, no, if you love, one more time, show me your hands. You love surprises. If you're at home, hit the like button in that comment section, whatever it might be. You love surprises. All right. Some people love surprises, some people don't. Imagine in your mind right now a really good friend of yours, your spouse, your partner, somebody says to you this, okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to pick you up at 8. Just be ready. Don't worry. We're going to have fun. Right? Some of us in the room, we just got super excited. We're like, yes, that sounds awesome. Do I need bail money or not? What are we doing, right? You're totally, but some of us just went into cold sweats. Right? No, what was your response to that idea of not knowing what's happening? You're just being kind of picked up. Are you nervous good or nervous bad, right? You have that experience? Nervous good or nervous bad? Maybe there's a track record with that person. You're no, not again. I will not. No, will I ever do that again, right? Here's the thing. All of us, uncertainty, our ability to kind of handle and navigate uncertainty is a spectrum, right? Some of us find uncertainty exhilarating, and some of us find it absolutely debilitating. And as people of faith, that's challenging because uncertainty is baked into this idea of faith. And that's why so many churches, so much faith, so much religion actually moves away from faith, because uncertainty is difficult. Because uncertainty, if you have a high intolerance for it, then what happens is in our lives, there's this experience that we get. And psychologists call it anticipatory fear, right? Anticipatory fear. An intolerance of uncertainty creates anticipatory fear. In the life of faith, we anticipate and get afraid of God. We get afraid of the future. We get afraid of what happens after we die. And so we want to create these systems of certainty so we can answer all those questions. And yet we're always being brought back to this great mysterious God, right? Like that song said earlier that we sang, God's bigger than I thought. And so anticipatory fear is when we worry about the outcome of a future event that we've never experienced before, right? That's how it gets defined. So we're kind of thinking, oh, this is going to happen. I don't want this to happen. And so we're like kind of paralyzed. There's a guy named Frank Anderson who's a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and a psychotherapist. So he's a pretty smart dude, or at least well-educated. I don't know, right? But he talks about 3 common ways that anticipatory fear comes into our hearts, right? Things that can trigger it in our lives. The first one, and see if any of this resonates with you. The first one is oftentimes we have this desire to avoid repeating past painful experiences. And so maybe you have a bad experience in a relationship. You had a bad experience driving. You had a bad experience buying a house. You had a bad experience at McDonald's. Am I right? Like, we've all been there, you know? And so what we do is we avoid, we out of our desire to not repeat it, we just avoid that. So I can remember one time we were on vacation, and it was Cindy, my mother-in-law who's here, my father-in-law, our whole family were there in Ohio at Cedar Point, and we go to Famous Dave's Barbecue. Any Famous Dave's Barbecue people? I know the one closed in Fort Collins over there. Some of you are clapping. That's good. Okay. Oh, by the way, totally free of charge. Famous Dave's cornbread mix at Costco. Thank me later, okay? Try all you want to get it right on your own. You just can't beat it. Okay, so here's the deal. We're there at Famous Dave's, and for some reason, Wendy decided to get the salmon. And I don't know if you remember this, Cindy. She's laughing. I think she remembers. It did not agree with her. And so Wendy spent the next day and a half on vacation just having a discussion with the salmon over and over again, if you know what I'm saying, right? And so it had to have been 2 years before Wendy ate salmon again, right? That's this. Right? Avoiding that past. So I'm not going to eat salmon. You just ask, you want salmon? No, right? I don't want to have that experience. Another way in which anticipatory fear settles into our lives is when we desire to protect ourselves from future painful experiences, but have nothing to do with our past, right? We didn't have any experience. We just are kind of overwhelmed with what might happen. It might happen. So it's not grounded in a past experience. It just might happen. So you heard on the news that there was a car accident on I-25 or on the major highway wherever you live. And so you decide, I am never driving on that road again. And so you get, that's a silly example, but that's the idea, right? It's something that could happen. I'm not going to go out on a date because it might break my heart. Right? I might end up with a broken heart. I've heard of other people. I've seen it on TV. I don't want to go through that pain. So we're just kind of avoiding it. A third way that we find ourselves in this anticipatory fear setting into our lives is our desire to avoid potential risks as a result of a past experience. So now we're avoiding risks. So this happens a lot of times. If you're in recovery, you recognize this. Maybe you're in recovery. The science really, and a lot of studies have shown, and working with folks who've overcome and been survivors of like eating disorders, there's this risk of falling back into it. There's this risk of falling back into drugs, this risk of falling back, this risk of gaining weight. And so that can turn into anticipatory fear. And there's this fear of kind of relapse. Now, anticipatory fear is powerful because what it does is it replaces what I would say God, some people call the universe, you call it life, whatever, but it replaces this peace of mind that I believe the Spirit of God wants to give to us with something we'll call dread. Dread. Anticipatory fear comes in and it removes and steals, in a sense, the peace of mind a peace about the future, a peace about where I am in life, what's happening, a peace about this sense that God has everything under control even when life is out of control, right? When I'm going through stuff that I know God has nothing to do with, I still know that God is with me in those moments, right? So dread sets in. And the Jesus word for dread is worry. Some of you might be familiar with some of the things that Jesus said around this idea. He would say, why do you worry about the clothes that you wear, or what you're going to eat tomorrow? Jesus isn't talking about like what I would consider normal worry. Like there is a worry that's healthy, right? If I didn't worry about my children in a healthy space, I wouldn't take them to get their vaccinations, or I wouldn't take them to school. I wouldn't do certain things, but I worry about them, and that moves me to do some healthy behaviors. So when Jesus talks about worry, don't like say, oh my gosh, if I'm concerned about I might lose my job, I'm worrying about that, and so I work really hard, or I'm starting to look for the jobs. Like don't freak out and think, oh, I'm not trusting God. The idea is dread that is just inhibiting right now. Like that sense of overwhelmness, right? There's this loss of hope that we go through. There's a fear of the future. And that fear of the future stunts our ability to make a decision right now or to experience joy in the present. And now what's fascinating is that they've done research and said there's a couple of things that can help us overcome this fear of the future at whatever level we're on. And those two things, there's a couple of things, but two of the things I thought were very fascinating were like the ability for people to develop a mantra and mindfulness. So a mantra, something you just say over and over, something you wake up in the morning and you're like, this is it, right? This is my mantra. And then there's a mindfulness, an awareness. And I started to think as I was thinking about what does it mean to show gratitude in the future and what could that do? And as I thought about the future, I just kept coming back to the 23rd Psalm, right? Maybe you've heard of the 23rd Psalm. It is a very powerful piece of literature that we have. The 23rd Psalm is read at hospital bedsides and hospice care and funerals. It's read all the time because there's something mystical about these words that produce a sense of comfort, that almost remove a bit of dread. And so I wanted to look and see, like, could the 23rd Psalm give us a mantra and give us some mindfulness so that we can tackle this fear of the future? So I want to walk through the 23rd Psalm with you together, if that's all right. If it's not, I'm going to do it anyway. You're free to leave. At whatever point, just drop your Connect card and your offering envelope in the back or log off, All right. So that was a transition. Get you breathe a little bit before we jump into the text. All right, so Psalm 23 is a poem. It's found, if you're new to Bible study, it's found in what in the Christian Bible we would call the Old Testament, which is a big chunk of the Christian Bible. And the Psalms is just a group of poetry. It's a whole bunch of poems about all different scenarios and settings in life. And this one is typically ascribed to King David. That's just what tradition says. And it starts off like this. And if it didn't recognize, you'll probably hear it and go, oh yeah. So the Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I lack. The Lord is my shepherd, there's nothing like. Maybe you've memorized it, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? But there's nothing that I lack. A couple things that are pretty cool about this opening statement here. The Lord is my shepherd. This is a statement of fact, right? This made perfect sense. I don't have a herd. Let me just put it that way. I've never raised sheep or cattle. Animal husbandry, not a part of my jam. I'm not. I met a guy this morning, new guy here, and he rocked the cowboy hat, like rocked it hard, like so awesome. I can't do it. I just can't do it. I don't know what it is. Too long of a face, too much city blood in me. I don't have any idea. But we kind of get the sense, get this idea that a shepherd is one that cares for and protects and comforts. The shepherd is responsible for the sheep, right? The sheep are irresponsible. Let's just face it, right? The sheep are just kind of like, let's go over there, And so there's this sense that, remember, the 23rd Psalm is saying more about the shepherd than the sheep, all right? But I love that there's a question we ought to ask. If I'm needing to state that God is my shepherd, the question becomes, who is not? Who is not? If I'm a Hebrew and I'm given this poem and I read it and I say Yahweh, the divine name, is my shepherd, what am I saying is that, well, I'm saying all these other gods aren't. And if you fast forward and put that into our lives, there's something that when we say God will be my shepherd, I will assume the authority of God in my life. That's saying I'm not assuming that my political party is my shepherd. My job is not my shepherd, right? And I think that's a wonderful thing to think through, like, what are the things in your life that naturally take the place of the shepherd? My bank account is my shepherd. That's where I find my comfort. Some of you are like, nope, not me, right? The stuff that I have, my house, my family, my friends. It's not that these are bad things, but we can put them in a space that they can become unhealthy things in our lives. And so we affirm, the 23rd Psalm affirms that, no, the Lord is my shepherd. And then it makes this statement, I don't lack anything. Now, this isn't this idea necessarily that, oh, I've got everything I ever wanted. It just means I have enough. And you'll hear me talk about enoughism. I think that's the vision of the writers of the Hebrew Scriptures, that God is a God of enough, that every person on the planet, because they're human beings made in the image of God, should have enough. And only God can create the conditions where everyone has enough, right? It's in my understanding of God. It's in the care and provision of the shepherd. I don't want for anything. I actually recognize I don't lack all that I need. And this gets expounded. It says in the text, in green pastures, he makes me lie down, right? In green pastures. Now remember, this is being written in a very desert-oriented space. So green pastures, right? This is written in a dry land. So this is a huge, just lush green pastures. I lie down. To still waters he leads me, to waters that are flowing, that are clean, but not so fast and so harsh that I have a hard time drinking. And this restores my soul, right? This actual idea is that this gives me life. This is where I find my life. And it's God who graciously provides food for the sheep. It's God who provides water, those things that we need to keep and sustain life. Then the psalm goes on and says, he guides me along right paths for the sake of his name. I love that phrase, right paths. Paths of righteousness, maybe you've heard. It's safe paths. It's paths that are filled with care. It's paths that I don't have to worry about falling off the edge of a cliff. See, this is where we have to find the balance of kind of legalism and laws and rules and religion, and recognize boundaries and recognize pathways that get set up for us that are safe, that are right, that produce a just world, that produce care and concern for the other. Right? And so the shepherd creates and walks the sheep along these paths that are safe, because that is consistent with the shepherd's character. It would be a terrible shepherd if you were just like, let's see how close to the cliff we can get with these dumb animals, right? Let's just see. I mean, let's see. I've been charged with 1,000. If I bring back 900, that's not bad. That's only 10% loss, right? That's an acceptable loss. No, the shepherd is going to find paths for the sake of the shepherd, right? It's a reflection of the shepherd, how well the sheep are cared for. And then we get this very famous passage where there's a shift, right? So the first part of the psalm God is spoken about as a shepherd, and in the third person, he does this, he does this, God does this, God does this. But then there's a shift to the first and the second person. Notice it says, even though I now walk through the valley of the shadow of death. This is right after the right paths, right? So even in the valley of the darkest shadows, right? Even in the deepest despair, there's a path that's set there that I can walk. And I don't fear the evil around me. And I love the shift, for you are with me. This is the actual center point of the poem, this phrase, you are with me. This is the point of the whole thing. You're with me. And I think the shift in language signifies the depth of the fear over our future uncertainty. Right? There's a movement from talking about God to finding myself in deep need of the presence of God. Because we do walk through our valleys of darkness. There is no get out of darkness, get out of evil, get out of pain free card in this life. There is no promise. There is no sense that God will make sure that you never walk through anything difficult. The promise is God is with me. The rod and the staff comfort me. Why do they comfort me? Because they guide me. They set me back on that path. When I start to wander off into the darkness, they set me back on this path to walk through. So here's the mantra that I think the psalmist gives us. This is a simple mantra that I think if we were to say it and get it in our hearts, it would make a huge difference as we think about the future. And that is this: God, thank you for being with me and comforting me. This is my mantra. Thank you for being with me and comforting me. This is my mantra. God, thank you for being with me and comforting me. And what that does is it orients our minds and our hearts towards the reality of God's presence and God's comfort. This is gratitude for the future. I am being grateful in the present moment for what I believe to be true in the future, that God is with me, comforting me. Right? That's the point of the 23rd Psalm. I think that's why the Psalm has such power, because it fixes our minds on what is true and what is good and what is certain amidst all the uncertainty. That God is with me. The rod and staff, they comfort me. So this will be my mantra. God, thank you for being with me and comforting me. And then we have another shift in the poem. We shift from the idea of a shepherd to a host at a feast, a banquet. And it says this, you set a table before me in front of my enemies. Somebody's like, why is that a blessing? You set a table before me in front of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. In other words, it's a type of protection and comforting. And my cup overflows. Now, here's what's fascinating. The host invites my enemies to dinner along with me. The host invites your enemies to dinner along with you. Something to be aware of here, the host has no enemies. Right? The host doesn't say, well, I'm going to invite my enemies and you. No, it's your enemies, the people you perceive. And this deep truth that the psalmist gives us is that we all come to the table. We all have cups that are overflowing with the mercy of God. We all have heads that are anointed with oil. Me and the people that I want to make my enemies. They all come to the table. And then at some point in time, I'm sitting around the table and I realize, wait a second, who's the enemy here? Maybe I'm the enemy. Because God, the host brought you to the table too. And the host told you, oh, in the presence of your enemies, I've set a table. Wait, I'm the enemy too. But this is a beautiful table because at this table, the divisions end. The divisions end. Because at this table, we're not fighting to get. We're all just simply accepting what is given. So much of the antagonisms and the tensions in our world are around me fighting to get what I think I need, what I want to deserve. And this is a table that is set where everybody comes together. You think I'm your enemy. I think you're my enemy. And all of a sudden, those lines fade because we're not fighting to get. We're just living in what's been given. And it's in that moment, right, the psalmist ends and says, indeed, goodness and mercy will pursue me all the days of my life. I love that word, pursue. Goodness and mercy, the host, the shepherd is pursuing. Goodness and mercy pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for endless days. I think this is a statement of decision about what I will do, not what's going to happen. I will dwell in the house of the Lord, this great metaphor. Jesus would talk about it as the kingdom of heaven, that I choose to live in that kingdom where there are no enemies, where there's a table set for everybody. I will live in that because goodness and mercy are pursuing me and pursuing all around me, and it's in there. So here's the mindfulness, right? If the mantra is, God, thank you for being with me and comforting me, then the mindfulness is that goodness and mercy will pursue me. It will pursue all of us when I choose to live under God's roof. Remember, God's the divine householder of the universe. We talked about that weeks ago. I know you've slept since then. It probably wasn't even a great message, but hey. This big idea that God is the divine householder, our Father, and when I choose to live under that roof, I'm living in the goodness and mercy of God that will pursue me. When I start to walk off that path, that goodness and mercy is going to pursue me. That's my mindfulness. So where is it? Where am I experiencing it? This word for mercy is in the Hebrew Bible is the essential character of God, his divine chesed, this loving kindness that just pursues, that never ends, always chasing after us. And so a table's been set where this is the crazy thing, we're not chasing our enemies and our enemies aren't chasing us. The table is the result of God chasing all of us. Like we're going to set a table here in just a moment, a metaphorical table. I'm not going to make you set the table. You can if you want to because we're doing Deck the Halls afterwards. You're welcome to stick around. But we're going to set a metaphorical table for communion that is this epitome of God chasing all of us, that we come to this table and we remember Jesus We take these elements that are symbolic of the body and the blood, and a table is set where we come together and we realize, wait a second, I'm not being pursued by an enemy. I'm not pursuing an enemy. It's the pursuit of God that has brought us here. And as much as I am being pursued by goodness and mercy, the ones that I think of as enemies are also being pursued. Everybody at the table is being pursued. So here's what I would encourage us not to miss. As we think about the future, as we are living in that anticipatory fear, when dread starts to set in, the gratitude for the future means adopting a mantra of God's comfort and a mindfulness of God's pursuit. That if I can develop this mantra every day of my life, God, thank you for being with me and comforting me. And if I can develop a mindfulness of the pursuit of God, that God is pursuing me, bringing me to this table where everybody is welcome, where everybody is redeemed, where everybody is finding hope, where everybody is learning to love, where everybody is being corrected, right? When I sit at that table, there I find that peace. There I am now recognized my cup is overflowing. So in your everyday normal life, it's just some things I would encourage you with this. I'd encourage you to memorize the 23rd Psalm if you haven't. Memorize it and trust in the mystery of its power. I can't explain it. I don't pretend to try to explain it, but there's something powerful and mysterious about this passage of Scripture that the Spirit of God has used for centuries, for millennia, to just bring comfort. And it's worth putting in our hearts. It's worth hiding in there because it can develop that mantra and that mindfulness. Here's another thing that I would say to you. If your fear of the future is impacting your present joy, such that you really are living in a space of dread, making decisions, thinking about it, I want to encourage you to talk to a therapist. I want to encourage you to think and consider the importance of your own mental health. One of the tragedies that has come in religion is that we have somehow pitted religion against therapeutic models. And the truth is, we shouldn't be doing that. We need to recognize that God uses wonderful therapists in our lives to help unlock things that are going on inside of us, to help us recognize there might be chemical imbalances that are taking place. And so I just want to encourage you, while you're memorizing the 23rd Psalm, while you're praying, while you're finding community and spiritual care, don't ever let that take the place. Don't ever let the idea of shame, of this sense, well, if I talk with a therapist and I don't have enough faith. No. I think God uses brilliant people in our lives to help us see and understand what's happening around us as well. So I would really encourage you, if that's where you are, find a therapist. If you need help finding a therapist, just write that on the back of the Connect card. We'd be happy to try and help get some referrals to you. But one of the dangers, one of the real problems that has happened in church world is that we've said, well, you just need to pray harder. You just need to fast, right? Because some demons only come out with prayer and fasting. I mean, this is what we say. And it's a misuse and it's abuse of of the word. It's a misuse of, I think, of just recognizing how God uses all things in our lives. And so I want to encourage you that there is no shame in that. It's a wonderful tool. And so I would just encourage you, if that's something in your life, develop the mantra, yes. Develop the mindfulness, yes. But recognize there might be trauma in your life that is of such a nature that you just need help processing that through. And a great therapist can do that, all right? So to help us kind of talk about and see this in our everyday normal lives, I'm excited to yet again have another conversation with one of our brand new council members. So do me a favor and welcome Autumn Patterson to the Crossroads stage this morning. Here we are. If you want to volunteer as a stagehand, you can write that on the Connect card as well. That would have been a lot easier with more than 3 people moving, hundreds of you sitting there doing nothing while I'm hunting for chairs, making me look ridiculous. All
I had to
right.
find the mic first.
I know. Autumn's
Sorry.
looking for the mic. Oh, my word. No, it's good.
It's a mess.
Okay. Autumn, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do in your everyday normal life.
Okay, my name is Autumn. Let's see, I am a parent of 10 children, and so I do that. That's a thing. And
That'll keep you busy.
That does less busy these days since they're older. But and I'm a software engineer for a large multinational company.
Nice, very cool. And been a part of Crossroads for quite a while?
Yeah, I don't know how many years. I've lost track.
Long time, yeah. And super, your
12,
whole
14.
family is very involved, engaged. We always see you guys running around, being a part of stuff. So thank you very much for that. So we're talking about this idea of looking into the future, at times being filled with dread, and saying, okay, how do I allow my faith and my walk with Jesus? I know that sounds kind of like a super churchy way of saying it, but I think there's some truth to that. Like, how that can actually impact and affect that. And as you think about your own life, how are you living this out? How are you trying to be mindful of God's presence in the future, grateful for the future in the middle of your present circumstances?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm kind of in a season of, what's the word? Not really knowing what the future is going to hold, of just like, of kind of a vortex of uncertainty. That's the word I was looking for.
There you go.
Uncertainty. I have a lot of that in my life right now, whether it's family life to some degree in various ways, maybe pursuing other opportunities career-wise, those sorts of things. Like I don't know what my life is going to look like in 5 years from now. So, and I've gone through highs and lows through that, and I'm really excited about what the future holds, and I'm really terrified, and it could go really badly or it could go really well, and I don't know. And so, in the midst of that, I've really had to just refix my eyes on Jesus, to be perfectly honest, because that's what I know is going to be certain in 5 years from now and 10 years from now.
So what does that look like for you when you say kind of fix my eyes on Jesus? Like, how do you do that? What does that look like in a normal?
How do I do that? Yeah, so I think it's two parts for me, and this isn't prescriptive. This is just what works. A lot of people, I think, would say prayer and Bible reading and stuff like that, and that can work sometimes for me, but realistically, it's just me setting down, quieting my heart and mind, and focusing on the fact that Jesus is there. He loves me. He's been there. And I have a lot of history there with that. I've been through a lot of bad circumstances, divorce, parental abuse. Yeah, there's a lot there that I've had to work through, and God's been with me through all of that. So there's a history there. You're talking about the past kind of being something that informs the future and informs your present and your faith. And so I can dig back into the past and I go, oh yeah, that's right. God showed up there. Or I know that was really hard and God showed up for me there. And I don't do it perfectly. You were talking about getting a therapist. I have a therapist. I need therapy. Holy cow. That's an important part of my journey. And so certainly I've leaned into therapy and taking advantage of care ministry here and pastoral staff and just all kinds of things. There's been a lot of support to help me over the years kind of get through it. So and all God shows up in all those ways and personally for me. And so I know I can trust that God's going to be there even when I don't feel it. And even in the midst of that, I've gone through really low points, like really low points. Like I've in this past season, to the point where there was a season where I wanted to take my life, and that's not normal for me, but that was a season for me that I really had to work through with my counselor and some friends and some support, and so yeah.
So I hear people seem to be a big part too of like in what you described of just people in your life kind of bringing you back to a place of mindfulness of God, right? And that's an important kind of reality, that so much of how we experience God's mercy and goodness pursuing us are oftentimes in the people that we surround ourselves with. Now, but that means something, though, on our part, right? That means a measure of vulnerability. That means like, could you maybe speak to that a little bit, like people in your life and at how you kind of opened yourself up and talked about certain things that kind of helped bring the mindfulness of God that God used?
Pass.
Perfectly legitimate.
No, that's a really tough. How long do we got? When I was closeted, that was actually a lot harder for me to do and be vulnerable. I definitely had a front. It's easier for me to do that now, and to be vulnerable with people and to be more honest with them. I would say for a long time I lived with a everything's okay, everything's put together kind of mentality here at church, at work, wherever. And now, I mean, I can definitely open up more and feel like I can connect with people a lot easier and let my guard down. Yeah.
It's tough stuff.
Yeah.
It's really difficult stuff. So you get the last word. How would you encourage people in their own lives? What would you say to folks that say, I'm dealing with this sense of dread. I want to develop a mindfulness to the comfort of God. I want to develop a mindfulness to the presence of God. What would you say to that person?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I think I would say go back and read James. Like that, when I'm in a real bad spot, sometimes it's really helpful for me. If you've never really experienced the presence of God and the peace that passes all understanding, all those things that the Bible promises God's going to come through on, I would highly encourage you to read through James. I think it's a great place to start, just because there's lots of encouragement there for us and lots of just good advice. But then just understand that God is available, and James will help you do that. That's why I suggest that. But just understand that, like I'm living proof. I'm still here, and that's by the grace of God in so many ways. Whether it was in middle school and high school, dealing with being bullied and closeted and parental abuse and all kinds of different things, or now where I'm struggling, or before where I went through a divorce, or whatever it was. Like in all of those seasons, there were times when I didn't do that well, and there's times when I did it well. And the times when I did it well were times when I just was like, okay, God, I need you. I need you to come through, and really just had to rest in that. And it is a mindset. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Give Autumn a great big hand. Thank you. Just leave those. Thank you. If you're new to Bible study, Autumn, she was referring to the letter of James, which is in the New Testament. And the good news is it's really short. So you can read that in one setting. She didn't tell you to read like Isaiah or something. That would have been a bummer, or Leviticus or something like that. But it is important, like, how do we put these habits in our lives that can just bring a mindfulness to us? So when we talk about, like, reading our Bibles or praying or coming to church, I do think all of that is about this mindfulness. It's about creating a sense in our lives of centrality of God's presence. And we have to be reminded of that because we're just bombarded all the time with things, not only from the outside, but from within ourselves. Right? That seek to want to kind of remove or distract us from that truth. So how does this idea of a mantra, how does this idea of mindfulness, of gratitude for the future, of God being with us and comforting us, how does it make me better as a human being? How does it make our world better? If we all walked around with this mantra, what would happen? Here's what I think would happen. I think that when we give gratitude for God's presence in the future, our minds are oriented towards hope. Our minds are oriented towards hope. And there's something very powerful about hope. It's one of the three things that are most important, Paul says: faith, hope, and love. The greatest is love, but that's how we get to love really through faith and hope, right? And I think it actually works this way. You experience hope. You go, where does that hope come from? It brings us to a place of faith, and faith is constantly about learning how to love more deeply and more broadly. It's this movement, hope, then faith, then love. Right? And the more you go and love somebody, you bring hope into their own life, and that just creates this cycle. And so having gratitude to the future says, I can have hope. That I think what Autumn said there was really interesting. She says, it could go really bad, or it could go really good. And that's the way we think about the future. We think of the future in those terms, but what God would say to us is, I'm going to be really with you. I'm going to be really with you in that. And so the way we think what should go and what our path should be, most of us can say the path I thought I would be on is not the one, right? If you'd have said to me, oh, Ryan, you're going to go out to Colorado and you're going to pastor this church, and in 2 years, you're going to be down 60% in attendance and 30% in giving, and it's going to be awesome. I don't know that the search team would have thought, this is the right guy. This is the right guy, you know. But God's with us. God's with us. And the mantra is, God, thank you for being with me. Thank you for comforting me. And you are pursuing me with your goodness and your mercy. So we're going to receive communion here in a moment. And as our room hosts kind of make their way forward with the bread and the cup, let's just ask you this question. What is it that God's inviting you into today? Maybe God's inviting you to memorize Psalm 23. I think that'd be wonderful to just say, this week I'm going to read it. And memorizing, you never make it your goal to memorize something. By the way, you make it your goal to read it 3 times a day. And if you read it 3 times a day for about 30 days, you'll memorize it, right? Maybe even sooner. So I'm going to read it when I wake up. I'm going to read it on my lunch break. I'm going to read it before I go to bed. If that's your goal, the outcome will be it gets into your heart. Maybe the Spirit is saying, maybe it's time to talk to a therapist. Maybe as I was sharing about past trauma that just necessitates extra hands and extra hearts and extra ears, like something came to mind and you say, yeah, that's really creating a sense of fear. And there's just going to be some courage to begin to investigate and reach out. So maybe it's for all of us to just start every day this week, just this week, with this simple prayer. God, thank you for being with me and comforting me in the challenges ahead. So we have the single-serve communion elements. Here's what we're going to do today. If you're a guest this morning, if you're brand new to faith, if you're here because she is really pretty or he is really handsome, and they said, we're going to church today, and you thought, sure, anything to spend time with you. And now you're like, oh, no. I don't think I'm allowed. You're allowed. Because this is the table that's set by God. And this is an invitation to experience God, the universe, love, grace, and to just open your heart. So what I always encourage folks is, I don't know where you are in your belief system. I don't know where you are in your understanding of God. But this is a moment to just bring that honesty. If you don't believe in God, if you maybe have rejected Jesus, maybe you had a bad experience and you thought, if this is what faith, I don't have anything to do with it, this might be a moment to just allow healing to take place in your life through the mystery of God, of the universe, whatever it might be. We take these symbols. They symbolize the body of Jesus, the blood of Jesus. They symbolize really coming from an ancient system of sacrifice where you would share a meal with your God. That's kind of what would happen. You'd go and you'd take your sacrifice, and then they would carve it up and they would kind of cook it. They'd give it back to you, and then you would be reconciled and you would enjoy that. And so in a sense, what we're saying is it is the Spirit of Jesus that nourishes us, that carries us through life. And we've taken that on. And I just want to say this is for everyone. This is for everyone. And this reminds us that God is as available as bread and juice for everybody. And so during this song, I invite you to come forward. And here's what we'll do today. Take the elements, and at any point during the song, just pray in your own heart. Maybe you're here with somebody. Maybe you're here with your family, a spouse, significant other. Maybe you two want to pray together, or your family want to just huddle together and just pray. About the future, whatever it might be. You just want to have a silent moment. And then just eat the bread and drink the juice as you'd like to. And just look around. If there's someone around you that isn't able to come forward, will you serve them? Will you take back the bread and juice and cup for them this morning as well? And we'll serve one another in that way. So this is a great song about the 23rd Psalm. And so as you come, and just let this speak to your heart that God is with you. And be a reminder that the body of Christ broken for you and the blood of Christ was shed for you so that you might know just how much God loves you and the world. So come and receive those elements and eat.